So good morning, everyone. My name is Jesse, and I am with Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. For those who don't know, we're all about bringing conservation, adventure, and science into classrooms around the world. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's part of our World Oceans Day week-long spectacular. So we've got 50 hangouts with ocean scientists, explorers, researchers from around the globe. It's very exciting, building up to Friday's World Oceans Day. Right now, we've got 3 classes from across North America. 3 more might join us as we continue, but we'll give them a chance to do a bit of a shout out. So we've got Miss Huddy Zukowski's grade, Miss Huddy's grade 2 from Calgary, Alberta. Hi, guys.
Hi, Calgary.
We've got Miss Brothers grade 7s in Ottawa, Ontario.
Yay.
There. We've got Miss Dylan 7/8 in Farmington, Missouri.
All right.
And we were just joined by Miss Moore's grade 6s in Winston. Hey, there we go. And then we're joined all the groups all at once. Okay, we've got all the. So, of course, the reason you guys are all here today is for our speaker. We're joined live in Ottawa by Jill Heinerth, who is the world-class cave diver. She is the first explorer in residence for the Royal Canadian Geographical Society. She's the recipient of every award you can possibly win in diving, over 30 years of experience. And she's coming out with 4 books in the next year and a bit as well. So it's very exciting. Thank you so much for joining us, Jill. Without further ado, take it away.
What we learned today.
All right, my pleasure. It looks like we got a couple other people that just signed on too. So I guess you'll take care of welcoming them. Mr. Greenfield, us, I guess.
Yeah.
And Miss Reynolds. All right. Welcome, everybody. I'm so excited to talk and share with you some of my explorations in underwater caves. What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to share my screen so I can show you some cool visuals as we go. And let me just pick the screen here and share. And Jesse, I think hopefully you can see that now.
Yep, we're good.
All right, awesome. So yeah, as Jesse was telling you, I'm the explorer in residence for the Royal Canadian Geographical Society, and I dive in underwater caves all around the world, and also in open ocean environments. And this is World Ocean Week. So what I thought I would share with you today is a little bit about the exploration work I do, but also a bit of understanding on how caves relate to oceans. So I'm going to take you on a journey from the inner space of caves all the way out to our oceans. So my job specifically is to document some of these crazy, hard to get to environments. And this is me with one of my underwater cameras. You can see it's kind of a beast. It's a big thing. And this looks like rather an unpleasant place to go diving. This is a swamp in North Florida. But this rather nasty looking swamp actually leads to a spring. So beneath my feet, there's like a shaft that goes down and leads to tunnels that are filled with water inside the planet. Tunnels like this. So, you know, oftentimes I'm in a cave like this. This one is in North Florida, but I travel in these caves all around the world, and these caves carry our drinking water. So they're sort of the beginning of the pipe in many ways, like water that lands on the surface of the earth, soaks into the ground, and it ends up in these inside the planet. It also like moves groundwater in between grains of sand underneath the surface of the earth. So some places I can't swim in, but some places like this are giant and I can swim in them. And these places lead out to all the way to ocean environments. And so my diving sometimes also takes place in caves that are directly in ocean environments, like this one. This is actually inside.
Jill, I don't know if you can hear me, but your audio cut off. We still got your screen up, and maybe not anymore. Well, we're going to wait a minute for Jill to get back in. I'll send her a quick email and see if she's no, she's out. Jill, No, nothing yet. Okay. This is half the fun of Hangouts. There's technical difficulty sometimes, but that's why. Oh,
Can
there
you
you
hear
are.
me?
We
I
can
can
hear you.
hear
Yeah,
you.
yeah, you're good. We
Yeah.
can hear you again.
Oh, that's really weird because I could hear you that whole time.
Okay.
So, let me just screen share again.
Yeah.
Application window. So can you still see my screen share?
I can see you personally, not your screen share right now.
Okay. All right, then let's see if you can see that now.
Yes, now we're good.
Okay. All right. I think you just lost me for some reason. I heard you the whole time, though, so that's good.
I'll keep my mic on, and if anything happens, I can prompt you and let you know that things have gone wrong.
Yeah, perfect.
Great.
So, yeah, so I also dive in these ocean environments, sometimes very deep diving to underwater caves that are right out in the ocean. But more often than not, my cave dives begin on land. And so I think of that really as the beginning of the pipe. So when I'm diving inside of these caves, I'm diving inside of water that is filtered down from the surface of the earth. And the caves that I dive in lead out to places like this, like underwater springs. So the water springs and flows out of the earth, and it leads into creeks and then to rivers and then to estuaries where all the animals, even the animals that live in oceans, grow in their nurseries. And then those estuaries lead out into ocean environments. So these caves are like the pipeline that serves the water from the land out to the ocean. So I think that water is really one of the most important issues of this century. And I'm really hoping that many of you kids that are listening today will be working in jobs in the future that help us protect freshwater resources and therefore protect the freshwater that leads out into the oceans and gives a healthy environment in estuaries and out and beyond. Now, inside caves, we find life. There are lots of things that live inside of caves, and a lot of these things that live in caves live in an interface in between freshwater and saltwater. So we also have saltwater, like the same ocean water, inside underwater caves, but these animals like living in that zone in between. Some of these animals are just amazing. This is one of my favorite animals. It's called a remipede. And this guy has venomous pincers and fangs. And if you'll notice, he has no eyes and no color, because there's really no point in having eyes if you live your entire life in the blackness of an underwater cave. And there's really no point in wearing like fancy clothes if nobody can see you, right? So this guy hunts down things 40 times his size and can neutralize them with its venom and then eat them over a long period of time. But he's a really interesting guy because he's a very long-lived animal. And so is this one. This is a blind albino crayfish that lives in an underwater cave. Now, these guys have relatives that live outside of caves. Like you might recognize this little guy in the lower corner here as a river crayfish. And so river crayfish, like lobsters, have eyes and they have color. But our blind albino guy has no eyes and no color. Now, the blind albino crayfish can live about 200 years, where a river crayfish lives maybe 2 or 3 years. So these guys can teach us a lot about evolution and survival. And maybe it's because the water that they're swimming in is so stable. We don't really know. And we hope to find out in the future. So these little guys in the jars are remipedes, like the one that you saw a couple of slides ago. And these guys are those voracious hunters. And what's cool about them is that they haven't evolved in over 65 million years. So we can find these animals in the fossil record 65 million years ago, but they're still swimming in caves today. So these caves are beautiful, as you can see. And they tell us a lot about past ocean levels. So physicists study these caves because they're interested in learning about where the ocean levels were at other times on planet Earth. They can find that out by rock samples that we bring them. So everything that you see in this picture that's kind of orange or red, red in color, that's of interest to physicists. And you can see in this slide, we're actually sampling some of that red dust from a layer. We're using a turkey baster from my kitchen. And we're sucking it out in between two layers of hard calcite material. So at one time, when ocean levels on the planet were much, much lower, these caves were dry. So the water soaked through the ceiling of the cave, and it dripped off the ceiling and it deposited onto formations on the floor or spread itself over large layers. And in some cases, it left a whole layer of this red material. Now, this red material that you can see kind of disturbed in this photo actually came from the Sahara Desert. So during very dry times on planet Earth, the dust from the Sahara Desert flew up into the atmosphere, and then it came across the Atlantic Ocean, and it rained down on this particular island in Abaco in the Bahamas. And then that red material was so fine that it managed to soak down through the ground, and when this cave was dry, it dripped off the ceiling and was deposited on the floor, and then later kind of sealed into the rock sediments over time. So if you imagine this cave when it was dry, it's kind of like if someone dripped candle wax off the ceiling onto the floor and made these really amazing looking formations. Then later, when the ocean levels rose, then these caves were filled with water, and now my colleagues and I get to swim through these caves. So today, we swim into these caves and we find a formation like this one you see on the right-hand side of the picture, and we cut it off. And then because they're very, very heavy, we use a lift bag that we inflate with air so we can lift that large formation off the floor. And then we'll swim it out of the cave. And our friends at the University of Miami actually cut this open. And what you see here in these layers are several layers that contain some of this red Sahara dust. And that actually helps us date how old this formation is and the last time that this cave was dry. So we can see in this particular formation, like 15,000 years before present, 60,000 years before present, and also 153,000 years before present, we can find layers of this red Sahara dust. So those are times when this cave was dry. We can actually go back as far as 350,000 years in this particular cave by looking at these formations. So it's kind of like counting back in the rings of tree growth when you cut open a tree. So that's a pretty interesting thing we can learn from these caves. And you can see the size of this formation and how that goes back 153,000 years. So imagine how far we could go back if we ever dared to drill into this formation. Because you can see a diver there in the center of the photo. So these are probably really, really old formations. These ones are in Bermuda, and I think they're some of the coolest things I've ever seen underwater. So these caves are beautiful, and these formations are all from dry times on planet Earth. But some of the most significant work I've done in tracking the journey of water and how it comes out of caves and even reaches the ocean is some work that I've done in mapping caves in 3 dimensions. So using this mapper, this is almost 20 years ago, we made the first 3-dimensional map of an underwater cave, well, even any cave. And this was an accurate map that we were able to make using this mapping device. And this cave water in North Florida actually leads all the way out to a spring that goes out into the Gulf of Mexico. And we hope one day to map the entire cave all the way out to that spring. But 20 years ago, we were using these rebreathers, this very advanced life support technology, to swim in these deep caves, 90 meters deep, on missions that were up to 23 hours long in the cave. Now, we were also using a tracking team that helped track our position from above the planet. So we were sending these ultra-low frequency radio beacon signals up through the rocks, so these guys could see exactly where we were beneath the surface of the Earth. And when you know exactly where someone is beneath the surface of the Earth, that gives you a much better chance at protecting the groundwater resources. So as I've traveled through these caves, I've gone under some pretty remarkable locations and found some good things and some bad things. So at times I found things like this green algae-filled water, that this is in an estuary on the edge of the Gulf of Mexico. And so this is a really bad water condition that we would want to protect. I've traveled under people's patios and homes. This is the cave tracking team with the radio beacon above us. I even traveled underneath this Sonny's Barbecue restaurant in North Florida, and these guys were tracking me. I was about 260 feet beneath them in a cave system, and the cave went directly under the restaurant. It even went underneath this salad bar. And some of you might even seen a movie that I made called Water's Journey, and these guys tracked us as we traveled right underneath the salad bar. But I've also gone into some pretty other interesting water systems as we followed the journey of water. I've even followed into some urban cave systems. So this is a stormwater conduit in Orlando, Florida, and we traveled inside these stormwater conduits, which I would not recommend anyone do because these can very rapidly fill up with water. So not a place that I want any of you to explore. But we went to these stormwater conduits after following a river to see where the real source of the river was. And as we traveled through these conduits, we eventually reached a Best Buy parking lot where we came out of the stormwater conduits. So anything that you do on the surface of the Earth, from like agriculture to even paving over surfaces, all the water that runs off of these paved surfaces can run into like reservoirs on the surface that eventually soak into the ground and reach the caves beneath the surface, and then those caves transmit the water out to springs and to rivers and eventually out to the ocean. So even in urban developments like this home development, the water that flows into the ground that gets like fertilized because people feel like they want green lawns will reach this estuary, or will reach this canal that will reach an estuary and eventually head out into the oceans. And we can see these plumes of algae, this green material, heading out into the ocean because of things that have happened on the landscape. Even places as far away as the Arctic, I explore the human influence that affects our oceans. So next week, in fact, on Saturday, I will be up 800 kilometers north of the Arctic Circle on an expedition filming changes in sea ice and the ice on the ocean, and as it breaks up and heads down the east coast of Labrador and Newfoundland, I'll be underneath icebergs and underneath the sea ice documenting the animals and the environments there as I go on. So, you know, as a kid, I wanted to be an astronaut, but I think I got to do something that was even more exciting by showing people how inner space is related to the oceans and the environments beyond. So what I want to remind you all of today is to remember that everything that happens on the surface of the Earth soaks into the ground, and I see it in these deep underwater caves, and then the cave water leads to other environments, to rivers, to estuaries, to affect the animals like these beautiful manatees in Florida, and the springs and the environments beyond. So everything in our environment is really connected by water. from the surface all the way out to our oceans. So I am a really lucky girl because I get to explore these remarkable places. And also with the help of the Royal Canadian Geographical Society, I get to meet lots of people, lots of inquisitive explorers like yourselves. And I hope now that will give me a chance to answer some of your questions. So I'll bring myself back. Hopefully you can see me again.
You can.
And great.
Thank
Happy
you
to
so
talk
much,
to you.
Jill. I love how science can sometimes utilize turkey basters and go underneath restaurants. That's very exciting.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, we will head to Calgary first for Miss Buddy's class. If you guys have questions, come on up.
All right. Hey, Miss Huddy's class.
Hi. Hi. Who inspired you?
Who inspired me? I loved watching programs by Jacques Cousteau when I was a little kid. So, you know, we only had two TV stations when I was a kid. And on Sunday night, Jacques Cousteau was on TV, and Jacques Cousteau's undersea adventures really inspired me. So you kids are so much luckier today because there's so many things you can see on TV, from Blue Planet to exploring by the seat of your pants online. So I hope that there's lots of people that will explore or will inspire your explorations in the future. Great question. Thank you.
I love how many people list Jacques Cousteau, the guy with. All right, Miss Brothers class, if you guys want to come up, so you're just have to demute your mic. It's behaving strangely for me, and then you'll be good to go. Yep. Great.
Okay, so we two quick questions. The first one is, do you ever get scared down in the caves, and have you ever gotten stuck?
Oh, those are both great questions. So yes, I get scared all the time. In fact, you know, anytime I do something new, I'm afraid. And I think that fear is a really good thing for anyone to experience, because I think fear takes us into the realm of discovery and exploration. So you should be afraid when you're doing something new or something that's dangerous, because it means that you care about the outcome. It means that you want to be safe. It means that you want to come home. And when I dive with other people that are afraid, then I know that they care about that too. So I think that they're safe people. And I would encourage you that when you're handing in an assignment or when you're doing something new, that if you feel that little tingle of pain in your stomach, that's good, because it means that perhaps you're doing something a little edgy, maybe something that's completely new for you, or maybe new for all of humanity. So embrace that fear, because if you don't get scared once in a while, then you're not really doing anything on the edge of the envelope. And I hope that you all will do that, because I think that takes you to exciting new things. And in terms of getting stuck, yeah, you know, I've had little experiences getting stuck traveling through small spaces. I had one bad one where my diving partner was stuck. And that's almost, in a way, even worse, because when they're like blocking the way out of the cave, I might as well be stuck, right? So I have to solve that problem for both of us to get us both home safely.
Wow. I don't suppose you have enough time to explain how you got out of that situation, or not?
Yeah, sure. So I was working with a scientist. It was a cave that was about that tall, so it was only big enough for us to move through with our gear on the sides of our bodies. And she got stuck and obliterated the visibility and then broke the guideline. And so the guideline is our tactile line that leads us out to the exit if we can't see. So I couldn't see, the guideline was broken, and my buddy was blocking the way out. So I had to calm my partner down, and then I had to patch the guideline with my own spool of line and my own cutter. So I had to patch that guideline, and then I had to feel the cave and move my partner into the area that was a little bit larger and unstick her from the guideline that was wrapped around her equipment. And then we had to come out without being able to see. So we had to hold the guideline and run it through our fingers all the way to the exit. And that's how we got home safe. But that's something that we practice a lot in case it happens.
I was going to say, that's what years of training gets you. Well done. Glad you're here. All right, let's go to Miss Dillon's class. If you guys have a question.
What is your favorite cave to go to?
Okay. First of all, hey, Miss Dillon's class, and you're in Missouri, I think. Thumbs up if you're in Missouri. All right, cool. There are caves in Missouri, which is cool. There's also like the Bonne Terre mine in Missouri that a lot of cave divers go to have a little bit of a tourist experience.
Right by us. We live right by that, about 20 miles.
Oh, cool. All right. So you've got all kinds of caves around your area because you've got springs in Missouri. I think my favorites are probably in Bermuda and the Bahamas in terms of the most beautiful. But there are caves all around the world. I've been everywhere from Christmas Island in the Indian Ocean, which is south of Jakarta, Indonesia, to caves in Australia, to springs under the Sahara Desert, and in Siberia and the Ural Mountains. So caves are all over the place, and they're all really different. Good question.
All right, so we're going to head to North Carolina now. So Miss Moore's class, if you guys have a question.
While exploring inside the caves, what is the most interesting artifact you found?
Ooh, well exploring the most impressive or interesting artifact. Well, I found everything from like new species of animals to human skulls left behind by Mayan and Lucayan civilizations in the caves. But I think one of the coolest things I found was last year. I was diving in a cave in the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico, and I was swimming into the cave, and there was this cow skull, and it was like a longhorn cow with big horns, and he almost looked like he was smiling. And when I swam by, I looked at his mouth and I went, whoa, what's with the grill? Because this cow had silver teeth. And I thought, that's crazy. Why does a cow have a grill? I called him Gangsta Cow because I thought it was so interesting. And so Gangsta Cow somebody had done some dentistry on his teeth and applied silver. And what we learned is that the Mayans, the ancient Mayan civilization in Mexico, was in great decline because of drought that they were suffering from. So they were leaving the big population centers, and they were like refugees walking into the jungle and the desert looking for new sources of water. They took with them all their household goods, and they took with them their livestock, and they took with them all their valuables. And so they thought it was a pretty good idea to hide their valuables inside the mouths of these cattle. So some poor guy had to open the mouth of the cow and say, hold still, I'm going to do some dentistry, and apply silver to his teeth. So I thought that was a pretty cool find, and the archaeologists thought it was pretty neat too.
Outstanding. All right, before we go to Freehold and to Camden and Maine, so with both your classes, I'm going to have to ask you to demute your mics. So we'll get to that in just a second. I'm going to pass on a question from Miss Brown's class in San Antonio, and that is, how much does your equipment weigh when you're under the water?
Sure, quite a bit. So I sometimes travel with like that big mapping device, a backup scooter, a couple of rebreathers, 5 or 6 scuba tanks, a giant camera, and I've carried as much as 250 kilograms of gear, or that's more than 500 pounds for Miss Canada's class in the US. So quite a bit of gear. It was really heavy, but we make it neutrally buoyant so that I can just push it or pull it through the water without it actually weighing down on my body.
All right, let's head to, again, we'll head to Maine. You guys joined us in right at the very end. So I have you as Miss Grannis Phoenix's class. And if you guys want to demute your mic, go right ahead.
Yep, we did. Yeah.
Cool.
Go for it.
How cold is it under the water under an iceberg?
That's a really good question. It's really cold in Antarctica. It's actually below the temperature in the freezer at your fridge at home. So it's actually minus 1.8 degrees, because in salt water, it can be even colder before ice forms. So in fresh water, it's going to form, right at 0 Celsius or 31 Fahrenheit. But it's below that in salt water. So 1/10 of a degree colder, and it would be frozen solid. So it's pretty cold.
Question. Just to note, we're getting some messages from classes. We are going to do a whole other round of questions, so every class is going to have a chance to do more. First, we'll go to freehold. So it's Miss Piscatelli's class. If you guys have a question, just come on up and go for it. Yep, you're good.
Hi, my name's Alyssa. Nice to meet you. Did you ever get hurt going into a cave?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, I mean, like anybody in kind of an adventurous outdoor action job, we have injuries that happen. Like I've slipped in my equipment and hurt my back, but I've also been bitten by a freshwater eel, bitten by a venomous water moccasin snake. And I've also had a case of what we call decompression illness, which is a diving injury. And for us, we kind of think of these as injuries in a way, like the same way a skier might, strain or break an ankle or something. Things can happen to people in adventurous careers, but we train and we practice to prevent these as much as possible.
Excellent.
Good question. Thanks, Alexa.
How did the moccasin? How long did it take to heal from the moccasin bite?
Actually, it wasn't much of a wound. So I was underwater in the opening to a cave, and I was using a rebreather that doesn't make any bubbles. So I was quiet, not making any bubbles, not disturbing the environment, and I was completely motionless. And I was looking up because I was waiting for a diver to swim above me so I could shoot their silhouette. But as I was holding onto my camera, my little index finger was like kind of moving a little bit as I was waiting to trigger the shutter on my camera. And as I was moving and waiting for the shutter, apparently there was a big snake like right here that I didn't see. And when my finger was moving, he went, "Oh, that looks like a happy worm," and he bit my finger. So I looked over, realized what it was, and thought, "Oh my God, that's a venomous snake." And I squeezed all the blood out of the little puncture wounds in my finger. And I thought, "Oh my God, what's going to happen? What's going to happen?" And nothing happened beyond like a little bit of bleeding. I actually called the university and said, "What's going to happen?" And they said that oftentimes a snake will make a dry bite first before wasting its precious venom. So I was very fortunate, and nothing happened. But there was about 20 minutes where I was sort of waiting for my head to explode.
Glad that's still intact. That's a great story for a snake bite. All right, let's go to Miss Huddy's class.
Oh, I can't hear you, Miss Huddy's class. So try again.
The mic's on.
He said, have you used ROV?
Oh, how do you?
Oh, have I used an ROV?
Yeah.
Have I used an ROV? Yes. Yeah, I've worked with remote operated vehicles. That's what ROVs are. Sometimes we use those for exploration. I've also worked with a new robot cave mapper. I've been helping as a test pilot and documentarian. And this new robot cave mapper swims through the cave all on its own. It's actually artificially intelligent. So eventually it's not going to need me at all because it can map the cave and then it can turn around and come home. And we're testing it in underwater caves right now because it's going to go to Jupiter's moon, Europa, and explore the oceans of outer space. So there are oceans underneath the frozen surface of Jupiter's moon, Europa. And that's kind of cool. Yeah, that's a good space question. So thank you for that.
You get to help train
Cool.
the robot that's going to Europa. That is okay. We'll talk about that later. Well, that's very exciting. All right, Miss Brothers class. If you guys have a second question.
Yeah. So the second question was, have you ever gotten lost in a cave?
I have not gotten lost in a cave, but that's certainly one of the big risks. It's very important to run a continuous guideline of string all the way through the cave so that if we have the visibility obliterated, we can follow it all the way out just by feel. People that are lazy and skip that step, thinking that they're going to be able to see all the way out, have lost their lives by breaking that safety rule. So it's one of our most important ones.
Just a really quick follow-up on that. What is the line made out of? Because it has to be pretty sturdy.
Yeah, the line is actually, it's just a double braided nylon string. It's pretty abrasion resistant. In caves that have a lot of flow where the string might be like wafting in the flow and hitting rocks, we put thicker guideline. But it's important for us also to be able to cut it, because if we get entangled for some reason, we need to be able to free ourselves, patch it, and then come home.
Question for Miss Brown's class in San Antonio again. Have you ever been claustrophobic while diving?
Ooh, yeah, you know, I'm not really claustrophobic, as you can imagine, because if I'm willing to swim under spaces that are smaller than underneath the chairs in your classroom, I'm not really claustrophobic. I get more claustrophobic in a cave that doesn't have water in it. And I know that sounds crazy too, but I guess I'm so well trained for the underwater environment that I get a little queasy when I'm in a dry cave in a small space. I feel like the world is closing in on me.
Wow. All right, let's go back to Miss Granite Phoenix's class. If you guys want to demute your mic and come on up. So, yeah.
Go ahead.
Have you ever seen an anglerfish?
Ooh, I haven't seen an anglerfish yet. Gosh, I really hope I would get to. But they're usually really, really deep in the ocean, deeper than I've been able to dive so far. Usually they get seen when people are in submarines or ROVs, but hopefully, because that's a pretty cool animal.
Can you tell it for the classes that might not know, can you tell us what an anglerfish is?
So an anglerfish, like, he has a great big mouth, and then he has like a little fishing rod off the front, and he dangles like this little sort of fishing rod to attract things. And so just like my finger wobbling in front of the water moccasin, a little moving knob will attract another fish. And when they get close to his fishing rod, he just goes and eats. So it's a strategy.
All right, let's go to Freehold. If you guys have a second question, Ms. Piscatelli's class, Greenfield. Hi.
Okay. Question. Make sure you write your turn over there.
What is the rarest animal you found in the caves?
Well, we find a lot of rare animals inside the caves because many of them are endemic to a single cave. In fact, I found some that are endemic to a single room in a single cave on the planet, which means we don't even know how many there are. We do know that many of these cave animals are on the IUCN Red List, which means they're as endangered as they can possibly be. Like, there might only be a few, like a handful of them on the planet. There could be more hiding within the rocks somewhere else on the planet. We just haven't found them yet. But because they're so rare and so endangered, it's really important for us to study them as fast as we can before we either pollute their environment, they're lost in some other way.
All right, let's go back to Miss Moore's class. If you guys have a second question.
Have you ever felt an earthquake or seismic activity while you were diving?
Ooh, cool question. No, I've never felt an earthquake, but I've been diving in a really cool place where I have a friend that was in an earthquake. So in Iceland, you might have seen this place. It's called Silfra, and it's the continental divide between the North American and the Eurasian plates. So it's a deep fracture, and a lot of people go diving and snorkeling in this fracture because it's some of the clearest water in the world. So it's right in between two tectonic plates. But it's safe because it's a place where the tectonic plates are spreading out rather than squishing together. So a lot of people go diving there. And my friend Yonina, who's a researcher that's looking at bacterial colonies in this fracture, she was inside there when an earthquake in Iceland happened. And all of a sudden the water was stirred up and she couldn't see. And it was really scary because it was loud and they were shaking and the water was stirred up. And it kind of was like milk. But she surfaced and got out just fine. But she said it was pretty scary. Yeah.
I urge all the classes when they're done to look up Silfra. So S-I-L-F-R-A. It's really beautiful. So you can check that out. And now we'll wrap up with the last question from Miss Dillon's class.
That's us.
Okay.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Isabelle. And
Hi, I'm Silas.
we would like to know, why do you do what you do?
Oh, you know, I pinch myself every day because I get to do a job that doesn't make me feel like I'm working very hard, because I'm doing exactly what I love. And I really wanted to be somebody that got to go to places that no one's ever been before. But more importantly, I wanted to be somebody that could also talk about these places and show them to people like you, and to inspire you guys to be explorers too, because there's a lot left on our world left to explore. And, you know, you guys will be looking inward, whether it's inward into nanotechnology or artificial intelligence, or into these remote places like I go, or out into outer space. There's a lot left to explore. And I hope that you guys like chase a dream so that you're working in a job that doesn't feel like work too.
And I can't picture a better message to end us off with than that. So what we do at the end of every Hangout, guys, so for all the classes, I'm going to deem everyone's microphone. If you guys can join me in saying big goodbye, thank you, Jill.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much for joining us, Jill. For all the classes, we'll be doing 40 more Hangouts throughout the week, so we look very forward to seeing you soon. And for now, thanks so much and have a lovely